Good afternoon, everyone. So we're very delighted to have a very interesting panel of these five gentlemen who practically run all the international brands themselves, and we're going to discuss about what makes global brands a success in India, and we're going to learn that from these five dignitaries here. My name is Ashita Marya. I'm the CEO of Franchise India. Practically from past 26 years, I've been working with all the brands who look forward to franchise or sub-franchise their brands in India. And I'm honored today to moderate the panel with leaders who are redefining the global food brands that thrive in the Indian market. India is a land of opportunity, but also complexity, and all of them will agree with that. And what makes a global brand succeed here is localization or scale. We're going to learn it here today. Or maybe the right partner in case you're looking for one. So today we'll get the real answers, and from those who are leading the charge. So we can start with you. So, with PF Chang and Chili's and Pizza Express, what is that rare one thing that you had to change when localization came to your mind in India, if at all it did?
Okay, so the global brands, to see the right success in the country, they have to become relevant for India. So they can't be just a brand in India, so they have to be a brand for India. So let me explain. So when I say what is a brand in India versus what is a brand for India, so these global brands, they are present in a lot of countries with a lot of formats as well, and having different menu. If they try to replicate the same menu which they have outside of India in the India country as well, they might not see the right success. So how do you maintain your core, which is what is the brand DNA? At the same time, how do you become relevant for the local audience as well? That is one piece, which is, I would say, the most important thing. For any brand, so whether it is PF Chang, whether it is Pizza Express for us, we have to work on a lot of things, right from asset design to finding the right menu soul, to the right portion size, because there are different eating habits for Indians. Like Indians love variety on the table versus having big portion sizes, which Americans used to have. So we have to work on the menu, we have to work on the pricing, portion size, how do you position the brand in the country, how do you become relevant for people, how to have a local and a global marketing connect as well, so that you can maintain the brand voice of tone. At the same time, you're relevant for the country as well. So I would say the success mantra will be don't lose your core, but at the same time become relevant for the country as well. And you might have to go back and rework on almost everything. And it may not be one fit formula for the brand in the country.
Sure, thanks. And how do you manage these things between a mass QSR with fine dining?
Okay, so QSR and I would say CDR concepts are very, very different. See, one thing is food is the hygiene. The food has to be good, whether it is a QSR or whether it is a CDR as well. In terms of QSR, while they focus on speed, consistency, accessibility, convenience, whereas a full service restaurant, I would say CDRs or restaurant, they charge for experience through food. People come for food and experience both, which might not be the case for a QSR. So the basic DNA and the mindset of operating a QSR versus CDR is very, very different. How do you make sure you talk about not just the food in case of CDR, but you also talk about the experience, which means how do you design your restaurant, what kind of music playlist you need to have, what kind of menu you need to have, how do you get the right set of people as well, how do you train them well, what kind of perception these customers will end up building for the brand. So it's like, I would say, it's a completely different DNA operating in QSR versus CDR. So CDRs are experience-led, whereas QSR is more convenience and price-led, in my experience.
Sure. So, Gaurav, now, when we come to Popeyes, it's well known for its unique flavor. So how did you maintain that in India, or is there anything that you changed, about the so-called DNA, and did it really help?
Okay, so I completely echo with what Vijay you talked about. You have to maintain the core and still be relevant to the country. I think the way we are evolving as a country, our dreams are global, our aspirations are global, but our palate is very local, right? And it's a genetic memory. It takes years to evolve, right? For the palate to evolve. So when we launch a global brand, when we launch Popeyes in India, the first thing we need to make sure is what is the core, and stick to the core. So obviously we stand for fried chicken. So we again made sure that in India all the advertising is around fried chicken. Cajun flavors or Louisiana style cooking is what it is known for. That's the core again which we have maintained in India, right? So we have not let go of the core flavor profile of the products. It's known for bold flavors in US. So it stands for bold flavors in US and in India as well. But that's where it changes, because a bold flavor for what an American citizen is probably a very bland profile of taste for Indians. And what is bold for North Indians can still be bland for people in the South. So we had to evolve the amount of boldness of flavor or the spiciness of the flavor that we had to bring in for the Indians, keeping the flavor profile same. Interestingly, Cajun, if you go into the core recipe of Cajun, it's very Indian in nature. It's onion, garlic, celery, spices which we find at our home. So it's not very alien to Indian taste palate. So that's one thing that we held on, and one thing which we changed as far as the flavors were concerned. Similarly, on elements of design, on elements of kitchen design, because each of these things have to evolve as per the market. In US, QSRs are generally on drive-thrus. They see a lot of car rush in the morning, afternoon, and evening sessions as people drive onwards to office and back to home. That's not the trend in India, right? In India, it's more a sit-out or a order-in kind of a concept still. And people want to take a break from, in US, it's convenience food. In India, it's, I want to take break from my daily meals. So that also requires us to change the way the kitchen works, the kitchen flows are. So a lot of things change, but the core remains the same. We stand for authentic Cajun flavors. We stand for the Louisiana style of cooking. We stand for a bold, flavorful chicken that we make in India, and that's the core of the brand. That's what we preserve.
Now go to Sanjay for Kopi Kenangan. It's scaled rapidly in Southeast Asian countries. So what is the insight that is, from that are expansions that you've got which are relevant to India? And how is it that you want to, replicate it in India? I understand you already have 5 outlets here, but only in Delhi and NCR so far.
So Kopi Kenangan is actually a brand that started in Indonesia, and it's a brand which was presented in a very, very different way in Indonesia. So there were 2-3 things that they did, and when it started in Indonesia, the market there also was dominated actually by global coffee brands. While Indonesia is a large coffee growing country, but still the cafe scene was dominated by the global brands. So what they did, and in some sense we are learning and trying to replicate it here also, what they did is, one, this is a company that is built on local knowledge, local palate, right? So even when they moved from Indonesia to Malaysia, which is just next door neighbor of Indonesia, they actually had a different blend in Malaysia, right? So this is a company, right from the start, it knew that food and beverage is very local. It is something I have to give what the palate demands, and I'm not here to teach people to have coffee, but that's what we do. So even in India, same thing what we have also done here. So our menu is more than 70% is localized to whether it is food or beverage. So that is one core of the brand itself. So every country, they have a different range, and that's what we have also done here. So right from day one, instead of adapting it later, right from day one, we had a lot of Indian flavors also. Of course, there is cappuccino, latte with Indian beans, etc. But at the same time, even we have beverages like kala khatta also in my menu. I have achari chicken, I have tandoori paneer sandwiches, etc. So right from the beginning, it's a brand that believes in localized offering. That is point number one. And that was a success there. We continue to do that in every market we go to. Similar way, and another thing that this brand did was that they had a very different language to the consumer, right? So a lot of cafe in Indonesia at that time used to be either formal setups, which are good for meetings, good for discussions, etc., or they used to be a very premium specialty kind of a feel. So that's what used to be there. And what this brand did is this brand came in with a very, very young language, very offerings which are very easy to understand. It's a very inclusive brand on pricing also, as well as in terms of the offering also. That's what we are trying to replicate here as well. To give you a sense, like for example, to give you something about the language, the largest drink is called Kopi Kenangan Mantan, which means coffee with the memory of my ex-girlfriend. Because it's a coffee that is sweet in the beginning, bitter at the end. The espresso shot is at the bottom. So that's the kind of language that the brand came with. And to a certain extent, we are also trying to do that in terms of being a lot more younger, being a lot more easy to understand brand. You don't get intimidated by walking into a Kenangan store. They don't ask you that I have 5 types of rose, 7 types of this, 10 types of that. So that's what we are replicating here. And we are doing a good mix of, as I said, 70% of our menu is something which is very tuned to the Indian palate, but the other 25-30% is something which is inspired from our success in Southeast Asia, right? So for example, we have an ingredient called gularen, which is palm sugar, which is a very specific character, a caramel, molasses, smoky sort of character, which goes very well with coffee. So we are taking that learning also and bringing that here. Yeah, so that at least I also have a distinctive identity to stand, right? Otherwise, of course, we all become the same after a certain point. So these were the typical things which were successful there. It's one of the fastest growing brands even now, of course, in Southeast Asia, but also otherwise globally. Yeah, and we try to learn some stuff. The core insight, we try to bring it here. But of course, we modify everything to the Indian requirements.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So now, Tarun, coming to you, because since, now that brand is only in Southeast Asia, Tim Hortons was a rage, much awaited in India as a brand. You've practically taken the brand from 12 to 40 outlets in very short span of time. What is it that you're differentiating, and is it really authentic of what people were looking at as Tim Hortons, or you've taken an Indian blend into it?
Okay, so I think like everybody mentioned here, when you bring an international brand to India, there are various levels of work involved. Of course, there's the soul of the brand or the core of the brand, which you should not dilute and must not dilute, because that is what you're known for, right? So if you take the example of Tim Hortons, our beverage range is our core, right? The core statements are that it's always 100% premium Arabica coffee and it's always fresh fruit. So those don't change, right? The donuts are always glazed fresh. That doesn't change. But when you go into a market as diverse as India, and I always say India is not one market, India is probably 20-25 markets, because the flavors change every few hundred kilometers. And Indians have a very proud food culture, right? No matter which part of the country you come from, whether you're Assamese, Bengali, South Indian, North Indian, there is always that comfort food that you go back to, right? So for any international brand coming into India, I don't think there is a copy paste which is possible on the menu side. You keep the core, so you keep the core intact. In our case, it was the core beverages which were intact, and then you add Indian flavors to it. So for us, there was a very, very deep research for about a year before we actually launched into India to say, one, who is our consumer in India, right? In terms of demography, in terms of age, background, city, what do they do? What do they eat right now? Where do they have their coffee? So I think that is a very core critical understanding, because you cannot appeal to everybody in India. As a cafe chain, you identify your audience and you appeal to them, right? And then you spread it out as much as possible. So for us, we did a lot of research on food. We did a lot of research on beverages, and also on the design, because Tim Hortons has an international design which they follow, and that language is pretty much relatable no matter where you go into the world. So you can't deviate drastically from that. But at the same time, you want to create something which appeals to people in India, because there is a certain positioning that you want, right? So I think the model evolved from there. There's a lot of innovation which came in. The design format is very different. The service model is different. The core beverages remain the same. In the food side, the platforms remain the same, right? So the core platforms are melt sandwiches, wraps, salads, and all that, right? So those remain the same. The flavor profiles and the taste profiles change, and they keep on continually evolving because you started with something which is you have the Indian flavors and you also have the Western flavors, and there's an audience for both for us, right? And it's again a very gray area. So if somebody is having a Western sandwich today, it's not that they will not have a paneer tikka or a chicken tikka tomorrow, right? They people like to experiment. People like to experience what the place is offering. So I think it's a whole journey. It's not something which you suddenly arrive and you say aha. It's not like that. It's you have to work on it in advance. You have to develop it. You have to have your conviction, and the conviction comes from the study that you do, the research that you do, and then you launch, and then you see how the market reacts. And there will always be corrections because the market continually keeps on evolving. But as long as you stay true to the core and you give people what they want, and that's a very simple statement when you say you give people what you want. It's a very complex statement actually because it's a function of food, beverage, service, ambience, price, value, everything, right? It all comes into that experience together. So I think if you research well, if you study well, and then you create your own niche in India, I think that's the right way to go about it, and that's what we did in Models as well.
So now we go to Karan. You've got the widest portfolio, and as a company, you're into travel, food, services as well. So what is it that takes you to? Is there any difference between homegrown brands when it comes to expansions or doing the right thing with the products versus an international brand? First, I would like to kind of understand that from you.
Yeah, so if we look at, I think we have two channels, right? One is travel, which is one segment for us, and we also do high street. So I think different strategies depending on the channel. I think the way we approach brands in the travel space is very different to how we approach brands in the high street. For high street now we've done a JV with Nando's, which are growing. We've now done it with Wagamama, which is another international brand, and we're growing. But I think on the travel space, you look at it, I think fundamentally the big insight for us that travel is ultimately about stress. And if you look at typical theories about people consuming and eating, when you go to a shopping mall, you're going there to spend, you're going there to enjoy. When you're traveling, it's only about stress. From the time you leave your house, you're stressed you will reach on time. When you check in, you're worried about the check-in line, you're worried about security, you're worried about how far your gate is, you're worried about the line, you're worried about the space where you put your bag. It's stress through the whole travel experience. And now in that environment, how do you design spaces for people to want to consume and spend money? And so I think we spend a lot of time in terms of first layouting within the space. So within an airport, where to locate, which format, what would work, what's right for the gates, what's right near the check-in counters, what's right just after security versus a bit deeper. So I think that's where we spend a lot of time in designing. I think then brand becomes, I think it's a very local subject in terms of what we think can drive penetration depending on the city and depending on the occasion, I would say the day part. Because in airports as well, your throughput is through the day. You have an X percentage that comes in the mornings, then you have some flights in the evening. So some formats work beautifully in airports, which are designed for that, and also have a high speed of service. Some may not be as well suited for an airport. Great brands, but may not work or really give the throughput in an airport environment. So I think we balance it out, and I think there's a degree of, at least in that space, given people are stressed, they tend to go towards familiarity. And I think brands do that as well, because brands ultimately stand for trust at the end of the day. And so I think that's where we look at having a good, well-balanced portfolio of three things: international brands, domestic or regional brands, and then our own in-house brands, which we kind of blend into the model.
One thing here in between, do you choose a brand as per a geography in India? Say a South Indian brand or a South Indian cuisine would do well in South India, or it doesn't really matter when it comes to travel?
So given a travel environment, it's getting more and more homogeneous in terms of eating habits and I think consumers moving. So I think when you're doing, like for example, in Chennai airport we operate, you can't not, like you're in South India, you'll still have a very strong North Indian offer. It's not that you won't do that, but you might choose a brand which is strong. So we have Sangeeta, which is operating in the airport. But now in Delhi or somewhere else, we might do our own format. Like in Delhi Terminal 3, we've got Delhi Street, which does serve South Indian, but it ticks the box on North Indian, etc. as well. So you blend it depending on each city and what you think is a strong brand or an offer which will kind of pull consumers in. We have another format called idli.com, which we operate in different airports. So it's one of the top performing outlets in like a Goa airport as well. So we try to, I think, tailor make it depending on the city and the different aspects of what brands are kind of strong within that particular area.
has it ever happened that you've opened up an outlet in one of the airports and it did not do well, and you placed it elsewhere and it did well?
All the time. All the time.
All the time?
Yeah, completely. And I think there's that piece where you need to keep churning. It's an environment. I think the great thing is with the brand partners, we've had long relationships. I think we've been working for now 15 plus years with everyone. I think built up a lot of trust in terms of working on things. And I think it's part of that where sometimes things don't work, you shift, bring in something else, that clicks, that fires. And I think within the portfolio, we're now in 19 airports, which are there. So we're able to kind of shift and look at different opportunities depending on what's right suited for that. So I think that reevaluation is something constantly you have to do, and airports also expect that from you.
Also, there's one thing I always wanted to ask. For you, it would be different on the airport, and for the not really so much for takeaways, but people who order food. Do you really feel it tastes the same, what it tastes in the restaurant? And would you be in for it? Because today, if you see the numbers, it's growing a lot, wherein people order in. So the percentage per restaurant or per QSR is increasing towards that. And does that really justify your real estate cost or the environment or the ambience that you create? Yeah.
Yeah, so I think there's a trade-off here that the customer has to understand, right? So any food is best when it is fresh, right? It is on the premise consumption, hot food or cold food, whatever, right? That's the best situation. But however, that is not convenience, because if I'm hungry sitting in my office, I want the food there, and the food travels. And it's a fact that some food travels better than other foods, right? So there are certain cuisines, certain foods, therefore they work very well on delivery. So for example, biryanis work very well, pizzas work very well, because it's a very easy to reheat that product.
But how about coffee?
Sorry?
How about coffee?
So coffee, what has happened is, so if you look 5-7 years back, coffee hardly had any delivery business, right? Now, the business has stepped up to counter that, because if you look at the packing technology today, right, I think that has really stepped up. We are able to get a decent temperature by the time the coffee reaches the customer. It's still hot. And the proof of that is that the coffee delivery business is going up. Right? So if the product is not good, the customer will not order it. It's very simple, right? Similarly for food, I think there are some foods which will travel well. There are some foods which will not travel well. And whatever can be reheated will work well in delivery. I think that's the thumb rule. Whatever does not work well, either the operator has to step up and improvise on the packaging, because there is a certain amount of adjustment that the customer will do, but not beyond that, right? So if the coffee comes cold, he's not going to accept it, right? Yeah. Similarly, if the naan or roti or whatever he gets, it comes at a state where he cannot even reheat and consume it properly, he's not going to order again, right? So I think it's how we step up, and how the customer also understands that, where is the right level of standard for that particular place of consumption. And I think it's a constant upgradation for us. And I think packing technology has also evolved a lot in the last few years.
And how does it really differentiate in terms of percentage, when it comes to other countries versus India?
I'm sure it would, because see, every place has a different trend when it comes to coffee, for example, right? A lot of countries have a very distinct trend where people are walking to the tube and walking to their offices, and they're carrying a cup of coffee with them. In India, we don't walk that much, right? So because of the weather and because of
have it in our cars, though.
We have it in our cars, but I think the experience is very different, right? If you're walking to a tube in London and it's cold and you're carrying a hot coffee and you're sipping it, it's very different than if you're doing it in a humid climate in Mumbai on a crowded street, right? So I think the need evolves as per the market, but every country or every city will have their nuances on that.
So I can just add a little bit on that. So what happens is some foods certainly travel better than others, like Tarun already said. But there is also a range of foods and beverage which are either difficult or complex to create at home. Like coffee, for example, we get favored by that, because an espresso is not very, you need a machine, you need some sort of an expertise to make it. So from that sense, while it may have suffered a little bit from cafe to home, but it is still a lot better than what you can create at home in terms of the coffee experience, right? So in that sense, it's a product that does, stands the test of, like Tarun said, if it is a compromise, look, India has so many brands and so much to offer that anybody who gives a less than acceptable experience is going to die. That is for sure. Right? Nobody is going to survive with substandard, offerings. So thereby, there is also a whole range of foods which are very complex to create, or or you don't get the things right, right? And thereby, they also are doing well in takeaway and delivery. So that's the other aspect which helps.
So, just on the topic of delivery as well, I think the way we look at it is just it comes down to GDP per capita, and I'll come back to why that as well is. And if you see, delivery as a trend is only growing. Second, India is real estate starved. You've got 1 billion plus people in a very small landmass, so real estate always is going to be a challenge, plus clean real estate, etc. So fundamentally, over the next decade or two, there's going to be a lot of pressure on real estate coming in where costs are going to go up disproportionately. Now, two things, or a few kind of paths are there, we think, at least for restaurants, right? One is you really focus on driving experience and think about experience seriously, not just saying experience, all restaurants are experience, and create compelling reasons for one to step out of the house. 15 years back, people said, "Khana acha hai, to log aayenge." Today, it's not just about that, but so I think it's much more than that today, and consumer expectations have shifted because at a click of a button, you can get food at home. So one is driving experience. The second is thinking of your real estate footprint. How do you build a more efficient model that can scale with a much smaller real estate? So I think that's where Indians are great at that jugaad, and that's where a lot of work doing in terms of making kitchens smaller. The QSR guys have led a lot of that work, but it's coming across the industry. And I think third is also when you look at the whole delivery experience, which is there with the aggregators, etc., that is the reality. To deliver food, it does cost money. It does cost the aggregators to deliver that, etc. And so margins will be slightly squeezed versus a dine-in customer. So what you do need is to drive delivery much more. You hope that grows also to make up if you start seeing dine-in struggle. The only way delivery is going to grow, or even dine-in, all this is GDP per capita. And so if there are more consumers coming in with more money to spend, that's what's going to drive and make it sustainable in the long run. Otherwise, eventually you'll have a squeeze because you won't get the consumer growth, but your real estate is going to keep rising. And so unless the GDP per capita grows, I think you'll have challenges in your model at some point in the future.
So, particularly for the, travel retail, you have all the food outlets there, and people have resonance, to those brands. Would it be only that you would want them to be at the airports or high streets, or you think, it's too costly to be there, but it's still, so my numbers are complementing, the expenses that I incur there, or is it better on high streets in terms of, I'm just talking about the real estate cost that you just said, that's the most important component today. So how does it work out for you?
So actually two separate relationships we have. One is on the travel side, and the second is the high street. I think over time you're seeing with some brands that those lines blur a bit. Generally or historically, we've been focused on the travel side, just because honestly last 10 years our whole management bandwidth has gone towards keeping up with the opportunity with privatization, etc. I think now as we've reached the scale, now we're kind of building all the other verticals and scaling those up as well. So two examples I'll give you where the relationship is blurred is both Nando's and Wagamama, which I mentioned. So Nando's started as a high street relationship, which we had the joint venture, and that's been a very interesting kind of successful story for us. Now we've taken the relationship into the airport. So if you fly through Delhi Terminal 3, you'll see a new Nando's ground floor, premium location, visible to every consumer who flies through the airport. So from a brand building in the country, there's a very strong push which will come around that. The flip side is Wagamama, where the relationship started for the airports, where we were bringing them into the country. And then we said, hey, why don't we extend this and do something on the high street side? So now with them, we formed a joint venture. We just launched in Bombay about 10 days back. And that's a brand which we believe has a lot of potential to scale as well also. So it's shifting a bit. And I think that's where we're seeing a lot of brands who are talking to us globally now are seeing it's a good opportunity where they can partner with us both on the airport side for strategic locations, but also on the high street to kind of build a strategy on that front.
All right. Thanks. And
I want to make a point on delivery. So previously, a lot of customers, they used to come to the restaurant first, and then they end up experiencing the brand through home delivery. But again, depending on the socio-economic class of different consumer, whether it is SCC, A, B, or C, depending on their income level, depending on their family values and their upbringing, global brands may be intimidating for a lot of people. So they may not want to come inside a restaurant, but delivery, because you are playing on your smartphone, on aggregator app, so people are comfortable ordering in versus going out to a restaurant. So what we have seen the trend, a lot of new consumers, they try the brand for the first time on home delivery. And if they like the food, then they understand the experience will be way better when they go to restaurant, because not every food can travel. So if they have a good experience in home delivery, that the experience in dining will be much better. That is, and I see home delivery as an incremental source of revenue for most of the brand. Now, point is, how do we make sure while the food won't taste the same, but how do we make sure the food is relevant for the people when they consume it at home? For example, even a pizza, when you consume something in a restaurant, it will taste very differently. But if you're able to deliver, let's say, in a give or take 30 minutes at home, and it is still warm, you may not have access to an oven, it is still okay. People won't mind consuming, let's say, which is not very hot, but which is eatable. But if, let's say, something is delivered in 1 hour, I'm sure, any food will go for a toss. So for any brand to sustain and succeed in this home delivery space, they have to make sure they are able to give some experience, and they have to define what that experience means for home delivery. But I see home delivery as an incremental source of revenue, and a lot of new consumers, they want to come and try the brand in home delivery.
So I think that's been a wonderful conversation here with all the panelists, with a lot of rich conversation. I think it's very clear that global brands building out in India, it's not easy. It needs a lot of strategy. It needs a lot of nuances of the country, a lot of localization, a lot of interest, from the cultural aspect, because it hits a lot. Like, I was having a conversation with him. He was in KFC earlier. And they said that after, KFC wanted to offer non-vegetarian, at the back end, they have 2 different teams who prepare non-veg and veg. So the one who's preparing non-vegetarian wears a red t-shirt, and the one who's preparing a vegetarian, food is wearing a green t-shirt. And even the utensils are different, areas are different. So, a brand goes to that extent to make a consumer comfortable eating what they're eating and expect quality standards from them every time. I hope today's discussion offered a valuable takeaway to all of you, and thank you so much. It's been a wonderful conversation with all of you. Thank you.